Welcome to the But She's Your Mother podcast, where we talk about all things related to being raised by narcissistic parents. Our guests are adult survivors of child abuse. Please note that this podcast is intended for mature audiences and may feature topics such as emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, domestic violence, self-harm, suicide, murder, and eating disorders. Opinions expressed by guests and survivors are their own. Some names may be changed or blocked out to protect minors, victims, and survivors. Thank you for listening to But She's Your Mother, the podcast. I recall I saw a picture, and I'm probably going to ask you if I can. Actually, I'm asking you, can I use it? Because I'm going to
100%.
where I think your brother is being forced to hug you. Can you give us some background on what was going on in that picture?
Yes, so that was a punishment that my mom would do. She had inspiration. It kind of went viral back in the early 2000s on Facebook, the hug it out or the get along shirt. So that's where she gained inspiration from this. But she would take it a little step further. It wouldn't just be put on the shirt or hug each other, take a picture, and then it be over. She would make us stand there and hug for multiple minutes, sometimes hours at a time. And it would not just be a normal hug. She knew that I felt extremely sexually violated by having my chest touched or having my chest stared at. I still don't fully understand why at the age of 10 years old I felt that level of violation. As I'm, unpacking, I can only imagine, but I did nonetheless. There have been multiple instances where my brothers would stare at my chest until I would be crying and begging my mom to make them stop. And she would just look at me and say, "You're so young, you don't even have anything to look at, and you're not special. Why do you think everybody looks at you that way?" So when she would do this punishment, she would have him bury his face in my chest as much as he could, make sure he could have as much contact with the front of my body as possible as part of the punishment because she knew it triggered me so bad. He would be bawling his eyes out too because he didn't want to touch me as much as he would act, when he's mad at me, threaten to hug me. He did not want to do this either. He was a victim too, as you know. And then she would take these photos and upload them on Facebook for all of her friends to comment and make fun of us. And of course, the narrative was, look at my bad kids not getting along, so I'm forcing them to get along. So after I was forced to endure being touched and have a face buried in my chest while being humiliated, we then had to read all of these comments about how ungrateful we are, how spoiled we are, how bad of children we were, and how much we deserved that punishment. And so I got to a point where I really just let anybody do whatever they wanted to my body because I could just turn off my brain and go somewhere else. And then they got what they wanted. There was no conflict, there was no fight anymore. And I would just disappear.
Part of that is also you learn that your body doesn't belong to you anyway. So why would you even have the ability to say no? And on top of that, you have a bunch of people, strangers and her connections on the internet, validating that you're the bad one and she's such a great mom for punishing you. And that's one of the ways it's happening. It's so rampant right now when you look at TikTok and you look at videos of kids being disciplined and crying, and there's this one guy who screams in their faces. We're watching child abuse, and so many people are making those comments, really not understanding that they are participating in child abuse. Because when we discipline our children, that's an embarrassing moment for them. Even in a non-abusive circumstance, that is a moment that a child is vulnerable and you're filming it and embarrassing them and creating a digital footprint all at the same time for someone who is below the age of consent. It actually makes my head explode.
It's horrifying. It's horrifying how, like you said, how normal it is. On those videos, how many people would say, I think the initial video of me explaining what's going on with me and my brother, I think it has, over 3 million views now. And half of the comment section is still people not getting it. It's just a hug. But what you're not seeing is what's beneath. It's extremely covert psychological and sexual abuse. And people do not see that because they just continue seeing unbehaved, disciplined children that are just being punished by a mom because it's just a hug and children don't need to say, give consent for that, apparently.
Well, the look on your face, the look in your eyes in that picture, I mean, you really have to be a complete moron not to recognize that you are in pain, that beyond discomfort, it's a heartbreaking picture to me. It's just devastating. Normally I would ask, but it's such a weird, I'm going to ask it anyway. It's obvious to me. What could have prevented you going no contact? Because even with everything that's happened, we look at the way that people comment on that photograph, for example. There are people who still don't get it because they'll go, oh, but you're an adult now. They can't hurt you anymore. You know, people still don't want to accept that as adults, when we can finally get away and their behavior doesn't change and we choose that it's not our fault. This is not what we wanted. So how could you were speaking up until what, a year ago? They had time to prevent the no contact. What could have done that? How could that have been achieved?
Unfortunately for my stepfather, there's absolutely nothing that man can do. He is, if it's up to me, he is going to spend the rest of his life in prison, and I am doing absolutely everything I can to make sure that that happens. As far as my mother, at this point in time, I will never speak to her willingly again, except for in court. And that's because, like you said, she has had so long. My mother is the reason I came forward. My mother taught me everything I knew about child sexual abuse and is the reason I saw all of the signs in my stepfather that I did. She's the reason that I was able to be saved. Unfortunately for her, it just so happened to be her husband. And she just so happens to be too cowardly to say, I might be single for the rest of my life, but at least I'm doing the right thing. She would rather be able to produce more children and have a relationship with a man than do the right thing. And I think it's extremely unfortunate. I have no problem sharing this. She was victimized as a child by her cousin as well. And her mother did not fight for her own justice. And my entire childhood, I was in very abusive ways taught about stranger danger, taught about the dangers of, certain men, what to look out for. She would do things like, show me like snuff films and force me to watch them so that I would understand why maybe she didn't let me walk to the gas station, why I wasn't allowed to do some of the things my other friends did. So the heart behind a lot of her abuse was pure. I really do believe that she was just so mentally deranged herself that she didn't see how harmful some of her teachings were, like, making me listen to the Toy Box Killer audio when I was 11 years old to teach me about the Toy Box Killer. Maybe could have waited a couple more years. But if she would have not only taken my side, but also been able to say, I made a mistake, I put myself before you, or maybe even if she was in some sort of state of denial, when I came to her and I said, this is what your husband asked me to do. As a mother, I couldn't imagine how I would feel if my daughter came to me and told me that this man that I trusted and loved asked her to do that. My entire world would be flipped upside down. I know, no questions asked. I would kick him out, believe her until he is proven innocent. But, I can't imagine how much denial she felt, and pretend that I give her that grace. If she would have taken all of these years where I have sent her articles on child sexual abuse and I have educated her and I have actually stood up for her against her own mother and told her mother that she needs to give my mother an apology for where she failed her, and I stood up for this woman time and time again, and she can agree with her own child abuse but can't agree with mine. Maybe had she been able to hold space for me and take a step back and realize that what she had did was deranged and wrong, and she truly believed that, and then also partook in supporting me and getting me justice, I could have her in my life. But at this point in time, like you said, she's making TikTok accounts. She's even posting photos of my daughter from the one time that I regrettably let them see her, knowing that I have such a strong stance about not letting my children be shown online. She's driven the nail in the coffin. It will never be opened again. And I hope that she can face some sort of charges for partaking in my abuse, for being a bystander, for letting it happen, and for encouraging and defending the man who did it and justifying it and saying that I deserved it. As far as my brothers go, I think that my little brother is completely brainwashed. I think that he is very much so in denial about his own abuse. I know how gaslighty they are. So I know that he was never able to hold space for the one time that he did witness his dad choking me. He was completely traumatized. He had barricaded himself in our fridge because he was that scared of what he was witnessing. He has trauma. He is a victim too, yet he will tell you nothing happened to him. So I hold space for him. I think he's in a lot of denial. I don't know if I'll ever close that door. Maybe I should. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm thinking about the fact that last year, I actually just posted a video on this too. He had commented on my videos that he had seen a video. He was trying to shine light on my hypersexuality being proof that my sexual abuse did not happen. Ironically, you know how that is. Um, but he had made a comment saying that he has a video of me and my friend when we were underage. It had to have been when we were in middle school and or ninth grade, pulling our pants down and getting naked in a sink. He was 11 years old when I left that house. So that means that somehow his dad and or my mom has this video that I don't even have a memory of, and has kept it all these years fresh enough that they could show him as recently as of last year, and now he's bragging about seeing it. Um, I I think that probably I just would not go contact. Now that I'm saying it out loud, just completely no contact. I don't think that there's anything my family could do at this point. They've made their stance clear. There's at this point, now that I'm saying it out loud, there is no excuse anymore. You have the internet, there's a plethora of information. They stalk my account where I do not just speak, I also show things from PubMed. I show statistic. It's not just me talking. There's other survivors like you that are also in my comment section that also get tagged, that they also have access to. And there is at this point no more excuse for this behavior because it is just objectively wrong, no matter what degree of severity it is.
Part of what's amazing to me in what you were just talking about is here's your brother blaming you, denying the abuse, yet he's being shown a video of you that should never exist in any universe, that was obviously taken by the stepfather, but none of it happened. And it's not registering, which does show you the level of brainwashing. And the other thing that happens with siblings in these narcissistic family systems environments is that they learn by example. So the way you're being treated now, he's learned that how he would be off the island is to be smeared and bullied and outed and all of those things, which was already happening when you were children in the way that your mother was using those photographs. So he already knows how that feels. Not excusing his behavior, by the way, just explaining for people out there who may not understand part of this dynamic. It sounds like, and oftentimes this is how it rolls out, needs their love, because they're not capable, and approval more than he needs a relationship with his sister. And by having that also, by not having a relationship with you, he can stay in that zone of denial and not deal with his own trauma. And given that, you're so young, at whatever age he's at, he's not in a place where he can even begin to look at that because he is under their emotional control. And again, not making any excuses, but rather explaining it, because it doesn't change. I mean, I'm 57, my brother's 5.5 years older, and he's still with my mother. When you were in foster care, is there a reason that they didn't pursue charges, or did they pursue charges against your stepfather? What happened?
Yeah, so this is a whole other box in and of itself. It has a lot to do with my religion. I ended up being put in a Christian foster home, which I am beyond thankful for because I was already heading down an extremely bad path with my hypersexuality. When I was living with my uncle, I was meeting men online on Snapchat, on Kick, and inviting them over without even knowing who they were. And allowing them to have sex with me. They were raping me. And I was allowing it to happen. And I can't imagine where I would have been had I not been put in such a strict home. So there is part of me that is extremely thankful for that. But I dove completely headfirst into the church because I was so empty. And God's love could fix all of my problems. That was the guarantee. If I would just accept, then everything would go away. Everything would be better, at least manageable. And I dove in completely headfirst. And I was that kind of Christian that said it was a sin for women to wear pants, that said it was a sin for women to even put highlights in their hair. I mean, I dove completely headfirst. And with that comes extreme forgiveness. So I really got to a point where I genuinely believed that me and all of my wrongdoings, all of my sin issues were the exact same morally as my stepfather's and my mother's. I really believed that we were both, all of us, deserving of hell the exact same. And so, how could I look at my stepfather and judge him for asking me to make that kind of content with him? Because he's just a sinner that just struggles with that sin, just like I struggle with hypersexuality. That's my sin, right? And so, I pushed everything completely under the rug under the guise of forgiveness. I allowed them access to me. I acted like everything was fine. I would go to their house and not bring it up. I still felt extremely uncomfortable the entire time, but I, of course, ignored those feelings because I was religious. But while I was living at this Christian foster home, I was obviously going through court, going through the counseling, all of the typical stuff normal foster kids go through. And then that's when we finally got to sit down with an attorney and they were going to go through with pressing charges. I remember I sat down with the district attorney and she gave me basically a list of options that I could do. And it ranged anything from just him being put on a sex offender registry to as much prison time as we could go through with. Of course, in that office, I said, go through with as much prison time as possible. And I look back and I'm like, that's what I said, the privacy. And I was emotionally safe and emotionally comfortable to say, this is what I really actually want. And I'm not sure if this is normal, if they normally do this. I'm not sure if maybe I had said something that gave the idea that I wasn't completely sure or not. But she said that she would give me a couple days to think about it and then call me just to make sure that that's for sure what I wanted to do. I was at school and it was a random day. I don't know what day it was, but I was walking out of my English class with my friends when I got the call. So I answered the call. I'm having a great day at school. I'm a Christian. I'm a really good Christian too. And she asks me if I want to go through with it. And immediately, all I'm thinking about in my head is how I felt when my dad went to prison and how I felt saying my dad's in prison while everybody else had dads that were out, how I felt having the only photos to show people of my dad being mugshots or articles about a meth lab explosion and how much shame came with that and how isolating it felt to know that I was never going to be able to just talk to my dad whenever I wanted or sit in my dad's lap if I wanted a hug or whatever, run from the police with my dad if you were me. And so I just thought about the amount of discomfort my brother would go through. And I also, of course, thought about how angry my mother would be at me. And so I said, no, I'm okay. I don't want to press charges. I remember saying that I just want to move on. I just want to move on with my life because I had planned to just stay with this foster home that I was already living with. And so I completely dropped charges. And then they told me that, because we're not dropping charges, I could go home if I wanted. And of course I said no. And the Christian foster home got guardianship of me. We were going to do a full on adoption, but my mom didn't want to give up her rights, which is fine. I ended up running away from that foster home anyway. That's what happened with the charges.
It makes my head want to explode.
I know.
I mean, in a lot of states, when somebody's arrested, for example, for domestic violence, it's not up to the victim to press charges because we recognize that victims are complicated and complex, and that in order to protect them and protect other people from being abused by that same individual, the state has to step in and be the bad guy. With a child, that should be like a bazillion times more the policy and even stronger. And what really makes me another level of angry is that it's clear that he would have digital files. He would have had there would have been a lot of evidence that they wouldn't have even needed you had they been doing their job effectively, which clearly they were not. Like you were failed and the ball was dropped more times than in an NBA basketball game.
Absolutely. I always thought it was so strange. And it's also a way that I've kind of gaslit myself into thinking, well, maybe my abuse was not what I thought it was, or maybe I am overreacting and I am being over dramatic, because why would they put that much decision over letting a pedophile walk free in the hands of a 14 or 15-year-old girl on a random day at school? It just made no sense to me. But I'm thankful that my parents, about a couple months into me starting my TikTok and coming forward on TikTok about everything going on, they threatened to take me to court for defamation. And of course, I'm like, please do take me to court for defamation. Let's go ahead and bring up the facts and see who's lying here. I'm more than happy to do that. I actually called the DA and I asked them what my options were. And that's when they told me that there is no statute of limitations for sex crimes against minors in Missouri. And so I reopened it. It's not gone anywhere. I'm still waiting in the queue, as you know, and unfortunately that's our justice system. And I agree, it's terrible, just the fact that you can say, there's possible evidence right there in that house that you could go get right now, and they say, well, just wait, or they don't do anything with it at all.
And here he is out there doing what he does, racking up victims, and nobody's doing anything about it. And hopefully, between this and your TikTok and a bunch of us out there, we can start to jump up and down so that the pressure is put on. Because oftentimes we know this is the only way that we get people to pay attention and do what they're supposed to be doing in the first place, which is protecting children. Fast forward a little bit, when you first went no contact, we'll just keep it to your mother's stepfather. We got this. I don't think you would have struggled with that no contact. If you did, let me know. What struggles have you experienced since being no contact with your mother, if any at all?
Going no contact with my mother was extremely difficult to cope with, in the fact that I officially was motherless. I have all daughters, and I officially had nobody that I could ask, is she behaving this way because I acted this way? Or, how did you do my hair at this age? How do I paint my toddler's nails? How do I teach my daughter how to do this? Because I was never taught those things because she didn't care. And also now that door is completely closed. It was hard for me to think about the fact that my kids weren't going to have grandparents that they could go to, because my grandparents were such a big part of my childhood, albeit not a safe place per se, but safer than my home. And I felt emotionally safe at that time. So it was extremely an important place for me to have at that moment of time in my childhood. And it took me a while to think about the fact that maybe I shouldn't grieve that so much, because I am working on myself now in a way that my children shouldn't need an escape from their home. My children won't need an escape from their mother. I mean, of course, maybe here and there, of course, but not every weekend. They are not, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing the right way, they are not going to be looking for every single chance they get to go to grandma and grandpa's house, to go to their friend's house. So, as much as it pained me that they weren't going to get that same experience that I had, it also motivated me to take my own personal healing seriously, to stop living in a victim mentality. And this happened to me, and now I'm just stuck, and I don't know how to control myself. I have borderline personality disorder, and I have complex post traumatic stress disorder, and I'm just stuck all the time. Now I have a reason and a motivation to force myself even faster than before, because I don't have a support system to get myself out of that rut and to learn those skills right alongside my toddler. Because as I'm learning to heal from my own childhood trauma, I'm learning that it is literally just parenting a toddler, except you're doing it to yourself. I'm parenting my inner toddler because she never got taught how to do anything. And so it's almost beautiful in a way to be able to do that hand in hand with my daughters. And it's something my mother was never brave enough to give me. And so I'm almost thankful in a way that she was so horrible, because now I can be absolutely everything she wasn't, completely without her help. And she can say that she had absolutely no part in any of it. And that makes me feel the best.
What have you learned about the abuse that you went through since becoming a mom yourself? What has that taught you about your own abuse?
That childhood sexual abuse is not just penetrative. I was never penetrated. I was never raped. I was never overtly touched, even. The only times that I was groped was one time my stepfather grabbed my vagina when I was playing in a dog crate, and it made me extremely uncomfortable. He could definitely brush it off as an accident because he was just playing with my legs and stuff, but it did make me feel uncomfortable. That did happen. He would smack my butt often and say I had a ghetto booty. So there were instances where more overt groping happened, but the majority of my sexual abuse that had the most impact on me are things like the fact that I know that he watched and recorded me through holes in my walls, and I don't know what he saw. I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what content he has and where he put it and who else saw it. And it horrifies me. It keeps me up at night thinking about what monsters have what footage of me and what they are doing with that content of an innocent preteen 10-year-old girl up to 13 years old. And it really has just opened my eyes to pay such close attention to everybody that will be in my children's lives and to pay attention to the more covert interactions that people have with my children, because it is in the small things like giving one of my daughters maybe an extra treat versus the other ones. It's something as small as, well, I noticed one got a better present than the others did for Christmas. It really opened my eyes up to see that, because that is where all of my grooming took place, was in the fact that I got a smartphone first. I'm the one who got to go get a soda whenever I wanted. I'm the one who got to get taken out of school early if I wanted, just because, and then he would take me to go see a movie. Those are all great parenting things, right? He looks like an exceptional dad. He's just spoiling his daughter. But you didn't see him in the bathroom recording me through the holes in the wall. And so child sexual abuse is not only absolutely horrific and traumatizing if it's penetrative. And I really wish more people would open their eyes to that and pay more attention.
The special treatment and the grooming, and it's so good that you're bringing those topics up, because people, they feel things about those moments, but they also deny them. Oh, I'm making too much of this. And we need to teach people to go with their instincts and to understand that when that little voice is activated, it's for good reason. And if you're wrong, cool. But if you're right, you've saved a child's life, you've saved a child's childhood. And when we talk about child sexual abuse and it not only being penetrative, the other thing is even your mother, in the materials that she was exposing you to, that is a form of child sexual abuse. That's child sexual abuse through no contact. And it's important that we recognize that that's also a part of it, and also creates a lot of damage and confusion in a little child's mind, in a young child's mind.
It does. I remember the material that, she was trying to teach me the dangers of the world from, specifically, the Toy Box Killer audio. If you've ever listened to that, I re-listened to it by accident as an adult when I was watching a documentary on it. And the flashbacks that I had when I accidentally listened to it again were just awful. I remember crying myself to sleep that night. I think I was 11 years old when I listened to it. And I just kept replaying certain parts of that audio in my mind. I couldn't process even half, I couldn't fathom half of the things that I had heard. I had not even seen half of the things that he was talking about done in a normal way. And so it completely terrified me. I would have reoccurring nightmares of men breaking into the house, abusing me in ways and murdering me. And I remember I would have reoccurring nightmares of somebody coming to my house or whatever car I was in and shooting me, because she would just expose me to this extremely graphic and very real material. I think people often forget that these things that you see going around on the internet, sometimes it's not acting, it's not CGI. Snuff films are very real a lot of the times. It's just so out there that you think it's fake. And it terrified me. It absolutely stuck with me forever. And it definitely desensitized me to some of the advances of my stepdad, to the point where it felt like love. It felt, like normal. And this is what I should accept because it wasn't as bad as what she showed me.
Well, also, it became normalized. That was the environment that you were living in. That was your normal. I want to touch on your biological father because we haven't really talked about him. So, how, like, just tell the story of him.
Oh
Let's do
man,
it
my
simply.
biological father. My biological father was put in prison when I was 5 or 6 years old. Before he was officially sent to prison, he had been in and out of jail my entire life.
Next time on, but she's your mother.
I don't have many memories of him growing up. I know that he would get sober once a week to see me on a Saturday. And usually I would spend those Saturdays with him running from the police with his friends. I remember a couple times of running into the apartment building and closing the blinds, turning off all of the lights, and him pushing us underneath of the window sill. And there was this little glass snowman.